Before we get into the actual video, I want to let everyone know who doesn't know this already that I completely revamped my entire Patreon, and I just recently uploaded a video where I go over everything that led up to me covering true crime cases. I'm also starting a series where I go through every single year that I've been on YouTube and I discuss some of the cases that have definitely left their mark on me. If extra content from me is something that you might be interested in, you can go to patreon.com/gabulosis or click the link in the description of this video. Okay, now let's get into the video. Hi everybody, welcome back. And if you are new, welcome. My name is Gabby, and if you've never been here before, never watched any of my videos, have no idea what I do here on my channel, I cover true crime cases, and all the cases that I cover are a little bit older. They're all basically 20 years or older. So if that's something that you might be interested in, maybe go down below, click the subscribe button, and also make sure to turn on the post notifications to be notified every time that I upload. So I was recently reached out to by a woman named Michelle, and she does a ton of true crime write-ups online, and she brought a case to my attention out of Indiana. I had never heard of this case before, and that's definitely due to the fact, like Michelle stated in her email, it has never been highly publicized. The articles and news segments surrounding it are very limited. Michelle wrote an incredible write-up on this case, so I do want to classify this video as a bit of a collaboration. I love working with other true crime creators, other people who have a passion for uncovering the truth and spreading the word about these cases, especially the ones that so desperately deserve to be solved after so many years. With all of that being said, this is the case of Ada Haradine. I do want to say that very little is known publicly about Ada's time growing up, but we do know that she was born Ada Van Loo in the year 1944 and would go on to marry Carl Edwin Haradine Jr., nicknamed Ed, in the year 1965, where she became Ada Haradine. The two would go on to welcome two boys into this world, Greg and Jeff. The family resided at 1815 Crabtree Lane within the luxurious East Lake Estates of Elkhart County, Indiana. It was renowned as one of the most exquisite residential areas in the county. Everyone described Ada pretty similarly. She was described as being quiet and kind. She was someone that definitely kept to herself, but never refrained from lending a helping hand to others. She was a very devoted wife, and she put her children before anything else in the world. Ada had worked previously as a teacher's aide at St. Thomas the Apostle Catholic School, but in 1985, she was a full-time stay-at-home mom. When it came to her husband and his profession, Ed possessed commendable achievements as an entrepreneur. He held the esteemed position of president at Carlton Manufacturing Incorporated, a distinguished firm known for its expertise in crafting upholstered furniture. The company had ties to the RV industry, and it also employed about 300 people in Elkhart. Now that we have a little bit of a backstory regarding Ada and her life, let's get into the case itself. The date in discussion is May 8th of 1985. On this day, Ada attended church at St. Thomas, and then around noon, she graced a luncheon hosted at the Elkhart YMCA. Shortly after, when the afternoon approached, she returned to the comfort of her home. To her delight, a little bit of time later, her niece paid her a visit. Everything was normal on this day, nothing out of the ordinary so far. During the visit, the two women, Ada and her niece, had been chatting when they heard an extremely strange and startling noise coming from somewhere inside of the home. They went to check it out, but couldn't locate the source of the noise, so they continued with their conversation from before. After her niece left, news reports claim that Ada was seen doing yard work in her backyard by one neighbor a little bit before 3, and then two neighbors spotted her in her yard a little bit after 3. Another witness, though, would come forward and say that they saw her speaking outside around this time with an unknown man. We'll discuss this a little more very soon. Somewhere between 3 p.m. and 3:20 p.m. that day in spring of 1985, Ada was abducted. Ada's son, Jeff, in 4th grade at the time, arrived home from school at 3:20 p.m. that day to find that his mother was nowhere to be found. He knew as soon as he got off the bus, though, that something was off, due to the fact that his mother was always there to meet him at the bus stop. He looked around the home, but there was no trace of where she could have gone. If she left the home knowing she wasn't going to be there to pick him up from the bus stop, she would have most likely left a note for him to find when he got home. She also hadn't taken anything with her. Not even her glasses, her purse, and to top it all off, her car was left behind. Also, as they would later find out, nothing was missing from the home. As an investigator for the Elkhart prosecutor's office, Dave Gizzi would later state about the home, the only thing strange about the home was there was nothing that was strange. Investigators on the case do believe that whatever the noise was in the home that Ada and her niece heard that afternoon is most likely tied to what happened to her. About a half an hour after getting home and realizing his mom was missing, Jeff decided to phone his dad at work and inform him that Ada was nowhere to be found. Ed told him that sometimes Ada's mother stops by, possibly she did this day, and that they went somewhere together. They would learn that Ada's mother had not seen her daughter though. Greg Haradine, Ada and Ed's other son, was 18 years old at the time and away at college. As soon as he heard what happened, he decided to make his way back home, and he got there the very next day. After a few hours of searching and asking around, they decided it was time to notify the local authorities. They would report her missing officially at 7:30 p.m. that evening. Now, when a married individual goes missing, they most often look at the spouse. They did question Ed, but he was eliminated very early on as a suspect in his wife's case. He had been at work, and there were quite a few people to vouch for that. Also, there were no reports of Ada and Ed having a tumultuous relationship. They seemed to truly love each other. It was apparent how distraught he was over his wife's disappearance. Ed was quoted saying, "There wasn't a weekend when we weren't together. We were a very married couple." We have covered dozens of cases on my channel where a child or teenager, especially a teenager, goes missing and authorities immediately write it off as a runaway case. Surprisingly, that is exactly what they did with this one. They believed that this woman had simply up and left her family behind, even though her family knew that was unlike her character. She would have never left her loved ones behind, especially not her children. They were her entire life. As word of her disappearance spread, people came forward though with information. This included the people who claimed that they saw her doing yard work. From what I read, it was raking a little after 3 p.m. that day. And the person who stated that they believed that they saw her speaking to a man outside. They put the time for this at about 3:10 p.m. When asked to describe this man, the witness stated he was driving a dark-colored 4-door car, but couldn't remember the color. It was either black, dark green, or dark blue. They stated that the man was well-dressed and looked to be about 6 feet tall. Now, based on this, I'm guessing that the person, while they were talking to Ada outside, had been outside of their vehicle. They put this person's age between 45 to 50 years old. Her family had no idea who this man could have been, and authorities believed that it could have been one of her friends, but no one who knew her could say who they thought it would be. If the witness account is true, was it someone who stopped by to ask for directions? Was he possibly selling something if it wasn't somebody that she knew? Or was he just a person who was coming through the area and made up an excuse to talk to her to abduct her? The thing is though that even with all this information, police still believed that she left on her own accord. They couldn't give a reason though why she would have, but this is what they were leaning towards. Ada's son, Greg, was quoted saying, "We went from living a normal family life one day, and then the next day, you guys," referring to reporters and photographers, "were outside taking pictures and saying she ran away. It makes you feel violated." There was a bit of information about this case coming out at the very beginning, but overall, this case would sit at a standstill for years. Authorities in Elkhart followed lead after lead, but it got them nowhere closer to discovering what happened to the 40-year-old mother of two. As the South Bend Tribune reported on March 6th of 1988, 3 years after her disappearance, dozens of people were interviewed. Some were hypnotized, and others were put under very discreet surveillance. Psychics and psychiatrists were consulted, and all tips were followed. Then, almost 3 years to the day, a gruesome discovery would be made. On Thursday, May 12th of 1988, mushroom hunters were walking in the woods just off Birch Road, north of US 12, in rural Cass County, Michigan, in an area roughly a half an hour's drive north of Elkhart, when they stumbled across something they would never forget. Along a very steep hillside, they located skeletal remains, what would be about 80% of a full skeleton. Cass County authorities were notified of the finding and made their way to the scene immediately. A scene that was about a half mile from any other homes. A desolate area near a lover's lane where teenagers would park so no eyes were on them. An area where people abandoned stolen cars. Not an area where a human being should be discarded in the hopes they would never be located. The bones would be discovered to be those of Ada Haradine through the method of comparing dental charts. Her family for years had the gut-wrenching feeling that something horrible had happened to her. But when reality hits that is exactly what happened, nothing can prepare you for it. No clothing was found near the remains, but they did locate her wedding ring near the bones, which also helped identify her. What was her cause of death, though? A forensic pathologist concluded that due to severe fractures to her jaw and skull, that she had died as a result of blunt force trauma to her head. What was used to take her life, though, is unknown. There were large rocks in this area of the woods, so it has been theorized that possibly one of these rocks had been used, but this has never been proven. They've never found any blood on any of these rocks. They were also unable to ascertain whether she was murdered where her remains were located or elsewhere, and then she had been dumped there. Reports claimed that other items were located near the site, possibly by investigators who came in the following Monday and used metal detectors, but what these items actually were and if they are in connection to Ada's murder has never been released to the public. Ada was laid to rest, but her story had not reached its resolution, and her family feels like it never will until there is justice served. They want that next level of closure more than anything. Ada's case turned from one of a missing person to one of a murder victim. New tips came into the department, but still, it's like every time they thought they were getting any closer or possibly they had their guy, things just did not fall into place. There was, at this time, offered up by the family, a $10,000 reward for anyone with information that led to an arrest in Ada's case. Again, years would pass with little updates. On the 10-year anniversary of when she was abducted, loved ones remembered her for who she was in life, not the tragedy at the end of it. As the South Bend Tribune highlighted in the article released on May 8th of 1995, there was a theory that possibly Ada knew the man she spoke to who drove the dark-colored car, and that he made up a story saying that he had an emergency so she would go with him that day, that he lured her away from her home to take her life. Ada's brother, Jim Van Loo, told the newspapers that he didn't know how believable that theory was. Despite 10 years passing, Jim said, "You never get over it, but you adjust, you deal with it." At this time, Ed Haradine had already been deceased 2 years. He had remarried in 1992, but passed in 1993 due to a brain aneurysm. He is buried next to Ada in Post Cemetery in Cass County, Michigan. Ada's family has held hope for all of these years that something new would come of everyone's efforts. It wouldn't be until 2013 when this case was brought back into the public eye once again. Still only primarily being covered in local areas to where she went missing and where her remains were located 3 years later. As the South Bend Tribune stated in an article released on May 17th of 2013, the Cass County Sheriff's Office, with conjunction with the Elkhart County Prosecutor's Office, the Elkhart City Police Department, and the Indiana State Police, have agreed to look into an unsolved homicide from 1985. The article goes on to say that investigators had resubmitted evidence seized over the years to the Michigan State Police Crime Laboratory for a more up-to-date examination. According to WSBT 22, the team will also submit more physical evidence to the Michigan State Crime Lab with the hope that new technology can find DNA not previously able to be detected. The results of these tests, though, have never been released to the public. A lot about this case in general, when it comes to the overall investigation, has been kept from the public. And a lot of times when information is kept from the public, it may also be kept from the family. I have talked to many family members of victims who know very little about where their loved one's case even lies, or if authorities are really staying active when it comes to investigating it. Investigators did have a person of interest according to newspaper articles, but who this person was again never told publicly. There have been quite a few theories in this case through the years, even one claiming that it could have been a hit put out by the mob. Still, until anything is proven true, They all remain just theories. This investigation, though, took them as far away as Puerto Rico. It seems that in 2013, they were taking a new look at the case, starting from the very beginning of it and seeing if they possibly could uncover something they didn't all those years before. Still, at the end of the day, that was 11 years ago, and there have been almost no updates since. Ada's son Jeff was quoted saying, "I think people out there know something. I think a couple of people have the answers I would like to have. What do I want out of it? I think we want the next level of closure if that is possible. We would like to know a little bit more about what happened." If you have any information regarding the case of Ada Haradine, you are urged to contact the Michiana Crime Stoppers at 574-288-STOP, which is 574-288-7867, or 800-342-STOP, which is 800-342-7867. Remember that you can stay anonymous. So that is the case of Ada Haradine. It is one that, like I stated before, and as you can tell by the length of this video, there's not a lot of information out there surrounding it. It is a case, though, that deserves to finally be solved, and I truly believe, and I agree with her son, that someone out there, possibly in that area, knows what happened. It is also a case that, in my opinion, solidifies how tragedy can strike in an instant. This was a mother who spent a majority of her time with her kids, with her husband, at the YMCA, at her church, and lived in a neighborhood that was deemed safe. This was someone who was seen within 5 to 10 minutes of when she was abducted. And still, for 3 years, they had no idea if she was alive out there somewhere. Like with any unsolved case, I truly hope that the family can gain some sort of closure someday. But thank you all for taking a little bit of time out of your day to hear about this case. And if there are any other cases that you possibly want me to cover here on my channel, make sure to send those over to gabulosiscaserequests at gmail.com. I hope you all have an amazing rest of your day. Stay safe, like always, and I will see you in the next one. Bye. A huge shout out to Michelle Short. Thank you so much for your request. If any of my subscribers want to check out her write-up, I will have that link down below in the description. And of course, go check out some of her other write-ups as well. She does an amazing job.